synthetic cosmos, or conclusive evidence that the world is not a rotating, revolving globe, but a stationary plane circle by rectangle. Preface to second edition. Since the first edition of this work, an unpretentious pamphlet of 48 pages, was published, so much interest in the subject has been manifested that a second edition is without doubt called for. In fact, long after the first edition was exhausted, letters from various parts of the world were received, asking for copies which, to our regret, could not be supplied. In that pamphlet, very much of the evidence we had accumulated from various sources had to be omitted, so as to reduce what otherwise would have been a bulky volume to a short treatise, retaining sufficient evidence to convince the minds of those who would take cognizance of and duly estimate proved facts of nature. Our labors have not been in vain. Many have been enabled to see through the delusions of modern astronomy. Letters from various parts testify that, in some cases, men and women have begun to make use of their brain power, which had been stunted and dwarfed by acceptation, without the slightest proof of the unscientific, unreasonable, unnatural, and infidel teachings of men foisted upon a credulous public in the name of science. Others, again, tell that the writers have thrown to the moles and to the bats the worldwide and almost universally believed hoax that we are living on a whirling sea-earth globe revolving faster than a cannonball travels, rushing through space at a rate beyond human power to conceive. And flying with the whole of the so-called solar system in another direction 20 times the speed of its rotation. To the editors of newspapers who, whether favorably or unfavorably, reviewed the pamphlet, our thanks are due and now respectfully tendered. This edition is sent forth with the assurance of the divine blessing and the firm conviction that truth is strong and must prevail. T.W. Castle Buildings, Durban, Natal, South Africa, November 1899. Introduction. It will be noticed that the style of this volume differs considerably from the first edition. In that edition we divided the book into 4 parts, viz. Scientific assertions, Bible statements, natural proofs, and applications and conclusion. The first of these was covered by extracts from well-known astronomical works. The second was filled with Bible quotations, the direct opposite of the astronomical speculations. The third division contains many proofs of the impossibility of the truth of the globe theory, the last division being made up of the logical arguments founded on the first 3. For convenience of reference, we have arranged the present edition alphabetically. In this way, any particular branch of the subject can be found without looking up the index, and something new is found on every page. Briefly, modern astronomical teaching affirms that we live on a globe, which rotates, revolves, and spins away in space at brain-reeling rates of speed, that the Sun is 1.5 million times the size of the Earth globe, and nearly 100 million miles distant from it. moon is about a quarter the size of the Earth, that it receives all its light from the sun, and is thus only a reflector, and not a giver of light, that it attracts the body of the Earth, and thus causes the tides, that the stars are worlds and suns, some of them equal in importance to our own, Sun himself, and others vastly superior, that these worlds, inhabited by sentient beings, are without numbers and occupy space, boundless in extent and illimitable in duration, the whole of these interlaced bodies being subject to, and supported by, universal gravitation, the foundation and the father of the whole fabric. To fanciful minds and theoretical speculators, the so-called science of modern astronomy furnishes a field unsurpassed in any science for the unrestrained license of the imagination, and the building up of a complicated conjuration of absurdities, such as to overawe the simpleton and make him gape with wonder, to deceive even those who truly believe their assumptions to be facts, and to make men doubt divine revelation with as little discrimination as they were formerly called upon to believe. If the reader will carefully follow and weigh the evidence in the following chapters, he cannot fail to be delivered from the thraldom of popular credulity and led to seek the truth for himself. Current science declares that the Earth was once shot off from the sun, a piece of molten rock which by universal attraction became larger, by indrafts from without, as the late R.A. Proctor assures us. This molten mass took 350 million years to cool down, for protoplasm to get a footing, which took millions of years by evolution and selection to produce a Darwinian ape. Evolution and selection allied to and combined with the survival of the fittest, again took many millions of years to evolve primeval man, many ages again elapsing before historical man was produced. There are 4 bodies, according to the late R.A. Proctor, which represent 4 stages of what we may term astronomical progression, as follow. The moon was once inhabited, but is now a chaotic mass. 2. The Earth is inhabited. It was once like the planet Jupiter. Earlier still it was like the Sun, and will become like the moon now is. Jupiter was once like the Sun. It is being prepared for inhabitants. When inhabited, it will be like the Earth. When its race as an inhabited world has been run, it will become like the moon. The Sun will become like Jupiter, and another sun will have taken its place. Later it will become like the Earth, and will then be inhabited. Later still it will become chaotic like the moon, and so on for countless ages, in fact forever. What a grand conception, yea, rather what a grand perversion of the reasoning powers, and what stultification of common sense. What an abuse of precious gifts in order to satisfy a fertile imagination, and supply idle curiosity with something new in the domain of science. No one who reads the Bible but can see how these unfounded speculations are diametrically opposed to its plain teaching. The science of the 19th century and the science of the Bible are totally at variance. If the one be true, the other is necessarily false. Which is it? Let the evidence here placed before the reader answer the question. Let honest-minded men and women who read these pages learn the truth for themselves by practical investigation into the facts herein set forth, which we challenge the whole scientific world to successfully dispute. We court no favor and fear no foe, scientific or otherwise. All we ask is careful attention and practical investigation. We have no fear as to the logical conclusion which shall be arrived at.
up, everyone? John Morgal here for a short video. Yes, I promise this will be short, but really important, at least to me. In the past year of first debunking, then researching, then jumping the fence to the bizarre conclusion that the heliocentric model absolutely doesn't work in terms of physical experiments, repeatable observations, or any sort of tangible evidence you can possibly imagine, all of that contradicts the heliocentric model, which is the one where we live, stuck to the side of a spinning sphere, thanks to the theory of gravity and the theory of the Big Bang, just to name a few. The main purpose of this video is not necessarily to provide a working stationary plane model, but instead to make a few points which must be considered and personally verified by each person on an individual level. So many people have asked me, and I've often asked myself, is there a silver bullet, or what is the silver bullet, so to speak, that will instantly show a person that the heliocentric model actually doesn't work? There really is such a robust smorgasbord of evidence to choose from. It's often difficult deciding where to begin with a standard, well-educated person and presenting them, the most outlandish and bizarre theory imaginable in such a way that they will not deem you hypnotized, stupid, crazy, or some combination of those three. It is very bizarre considering the extremely nonsensical and indeed preposterous so-called pillars of the heliocentric model, including but not limited to curvature of the Earth's overall surface, making it a sphere, which is an assumption that is proven to be false. Another one would be axial rotation, meaning the North Polar area spins at, half the speed as the hour hand on a clock, while the equator allegedly spins 1,037.5 miles per hour, with no sense of disparity in between the two positions, even though at the North Pole spinning half the speed as the hour hand on a clock, you would be parallel with the axis and on top of the axis. However, at the equator, while spinning 1,037.5 miles an hour, you'd be perpendicular to the axis, 4,000 miles away from the center of rotation, and zipping around a curve, vertically falling about 130 miles an hour at the equator. Yet, there's no sense of disparity of spinning, centrifugal force, gravity, that sort of thing between the North Pole and the equator. Now, gravity is another big one in terms of these assumptions that are allegedly responsible. Gravity is allegedly responsible for tethering the sun to the galactic center during its theoretical 250 million year cycle around the hypothetical Milky Way galaxy. Plus, gravity tethers the Earth and all of the other so-called planets theoretically to the sun, and even further, allegedly tethering the moon to the Earth in such a way that gravity is undetectable. One would imagine that with all of these complex operations of gravity and it being such a powerful and abundant force, traversing and penetrating all matter, space and time, you would think, would be just full of all sorts of evidence of gravity, and it would be detectable in a very tangible sense, especially when talking about nearby relationships involving our local celestial bodies such as the moon and the sun. Now, this is of course not the case, and only within the last few weeks or months, maybe, gravity waves have been conveniently, allegedly discovered by none other than LIGO, a group of scientists, and LIGO is some sort of interferometer device. It's the, quote, most precise measuring device ever built. But this group of scientists running LIGO, who just so happen to be very thirsty for grant money, they've convinced themselves, due to a blip on a chart, that they have found proof of gravity waves, as well as black holes, as well as binary black holes, as well as binary black holes merging into a singularity, double positive, single singularity, but whatever. But all of these, very, very exciting and astounding discoveries by LIGO, because they interpreted a blip on a chart.
We have detected gravitational waves. They were detected by LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. LIGO is the most precise measuring device ever built. Let me start with what we saw. So on September 14th, 2015, Anna recorded a signal, and the signal had a very specific characteristic. The characteristic of, as time went forward, the frequency went up. And now it took us months of careful checking, rechecking, analysis, looking at every piece of data to make sure that what we saw was not something that wasn't a gravitational wave, but in fact it was a gravitational wave. And we've convinced ourselves.
That's the case, and we're here to announce that today.
By the way, this is not a Hollywood production that I'm going to show you. It is actually a real computer simulation, 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 a real computer simulation.
Talk about the gravitational waves. You didn't see any gravitational waves there. What you saw was actually black holes. Now let me look at this from the gravitational wave perspective. So you're going to see again a computer simulation. This is a real simulation. So you're going to see again a computer simulation. This is a real simulation. A computer simulation. This is a real simulation. A computer simulation. This is a real simulation. A computer simulation. This is a real simulation.
Let me start with what we saw. So on September 14th, 2015, the two LIGO observatories in Hanford, Washington, and Livingston, Louisiana, recorded a signal nearly at the same time, nearly simultaneously, and the signal had a very specific characteristic. The characteristic of, as time went forward, the frequency went up.
And they made a very convincing CGI rendering of what the gullible scientists at LIGO concocted to lend credence to their very ambitious and flimsy evidence of so-called gravity waves no less than 1.3 billion years ago, ergo 1.3 billion light years away, and yet we can't detect any sort of gravity waves emanating from the galactic center or the sun or the moon. Yeah. Okay, so for one thing, if, quote, gravity in an Einsteinian sense was such a well-known, proven fact, like what goes up must come down, which is, by the way, not debated, then why do we need multi-billion-dollar lie factories to produce pseudoscientific hyperbole masquerading as scientific proof of a thing so preposterous and unbelievable as gravity, yet is considered a known fact, as scientists have been frantically searching for the so-called gravity waves now that gravity in general has been 100% debunked? It is rather convenient, ironic, and laughable at once to the casual observer, and I hope that the liaretical embellishists responsible for the bogus claim with LIGO for proof of gravity from over 1.3 billion years ago will be remembered on the proper side of history, which is that of totally blind followers of the religion of scientism or a willful deceiver. Or possibly just a compartmentalized spokesperson who reads from a cue card, fully believing the utter nonsense being purported, or just maybe not even understanding it at all and just reading the cue card. But so this very elusive and inherently contradictory gravity, which has never been proven or observed, but only assumed to be the cause for must go down. However, gravity as an Einsteinian warping of theoretical space-time is debunked by so many factors it's almost impossible to mention them all. For one, the Earth is obviously a stationary plane, lacking all curvature and axial rotation, but even humoring the heliocentric model, things like gravity really don't explain the relationships between far-distant celestial bodies, connected by nothing more than the vacuum of space, and the undetectable, unfalsifiable theory of gravity. This leads to the further bizarre hypotheses of dark matter to explain away the impossibility of a heliocentric gravitic universe, and specifically certain galaxies, and the theoretical physicists are emotionally, mentally, and financially incapable of humoring what happens to be the truth as a hypothesis worthy of
scientific study and testing.
When the truth becomes incompatible with your belief system, then you will never consider the truth as an option and will always deem it as a nonsensical joke, exactly as we're all trained to do since we were children. People often ask me, what is your goal? What do you plan to do with this flat earth truth? It seems like all you want to do is talk about it, argue the points, and make videos about it. A lot of people find my work helpful and sensible, and others find my work garbage and a waste of time. Now, I would never be so naive to think that my approach to this topic would be loved by all, but at least I can try to do my best to spread this truth. Now, I see this ultimate truth as such an important topic to share with people because awareness of any issue is key. I've found, unfortunately so, that there is no sort of silver bullet that will instantly wake someone up to this topic. People are, for the most part, hardwired to reject this topic no matter what. And so the best that we can do is present evidence in a logical fashion and testimony in terms of how we as globers became globe earth skeptics and ultimately flat earth proponents, and how we came to the conclusions not by some illusion or hypnotism or leap of faith, but instead as an honest result of following the scientific method, which involves humoring theories to test their validity. And this is the very fundamental purpose of the scientific method to begin with. On the other hand, the end of that process, the end of the scientific method, is that we must ultimately cast aside theorem which do not adhere to observable reality. So if a theory is falsified by even a single experiment or observation, or especially multiple experiments and observations, then that theorem, there's no further reason to humor that theorem as possible because it has been falsified. Now, with that being said, and approaching the major